Okay, so I'm just going to do another little video on the steering of this car based on what I learnt at Hampton Downs the other day. So I went out, had about only 3 sets of tyres to go through, but I wanted to just test the steering feel. So at the moment it's got 7 degrees camber, roughly 8 degrees caster, and an unknown quantity of toe out. I just did the alignment for toe by eye before I went on the track, so nothing's perfect, but the biggest change here is that we've got a lot more camber than what we used to have. So that's 7 degrees camber at the moment. What I'm going to do again is just drop it to the ground, see what that contact patch looks like at full steering lock, and just try to get an idea of how much lean it has, because I still feel the car has too much lean at a big angle. So it's still got a lot of lean on it, more lean than what we need. I am going to find out next where the sweet spot is. So the sweet spot is kind of where the wheel is actually sitting flat on the concrete. So I just want to see what amount of steering lock that is, because I roughly know from when I was driving the car where the car tended to want to sit. So I just want to see if that correlates to where the wheel actually sits flat, which I think it will. So now if you pictured that car drifting, this is what I was feeling when I was driving. I was feeling that the car wanted to always drift at about that angle, because the wheel's flat, and that's the easiest way for it to drive, flat. So what I was feeling through the steering was basically that was the sort of angle that the car felt like it wanted to keep going back to when I was drifting. So any less steering lock and the wheel starts to camber onto the inside edge, and any more wheel lock and the wheel starts to go to the outside edge. So based on that, I now know that I basically need to get the wheel more flatter throughout the wheel lock range of the car. So to do that, I'm going to adjust the KPI angle of the suspension setup quite crudely, and I'm just going to come into here. I'm just going to either slot this shock hole, or I'm just going to make up some little washer kind of adapter to maybe move the top of the hub into the shock by just maybe roughly 2 mils. So what that will do is it will basically bring the wheel even more closer to the shock, and it will reduce the amount of sort of wheel lean we get throughout the range. Now the question is, how much is that going to affect steering feel? I don't know. So this is going to be a trial, and just to see what we can do, because I'm still running factory Sylvia knuckles. So this car doesn't have wires fab, it doesn't have anything fancy. It's got some factory cut and weld knuckles, it's got good lower control arms, it's got some adjustable camber and caster top plates. But in terms of knuckle design, it's just a factory knuckle, so which has been cut and welded to an unknown specification. It's been done by Coastal Motorsports, but I just don't know what the exact settings of that specific knuckle are. But I think if I can get that wheel more flat throughout the range of travel, then I believe the car will sit better on steering lock. Now, I'll just give a quick summary of how the car felt to me at Hampton Downs the other day. The car felt very, in the steering it felt very precise, very controllable. I could trust it a lot, bearing in mind that I hadn't actually done a wheel alignment on it. I just done it by eye, except for the camber and the casters roughly with a tape measure. But the car was very trustworthy. It was very snappy in the front. I was comfortable throwing it in backwards, and I think if I did more of those I could sort of get that a bit more consistent. Just the issue it had was it always wanted to sit on that sort of angle, and it was very easy to throw more angle on. I could do that through the steering without a problem. It basically wanted to, anything more than that it was kind of fighting. Now this is the trade-off we're going to have by flattening out the wheel on lock versus letting it lean a little bit. And that is, I'm not too sure how much of the steering feel we're going to sacrifice for that, and this is one of the key reasons I like the feel of wheel lean, because it's a good force through the steering wheel to sort of self-center. Now Wisefab do their setup different. They have a bit of caster trail, and to be honest I don't know exactly what they do in the new kit, if it's any different to the old kit, but Wisefab is probably considered the most common and most trusted and possibly one of the world's best steering setups. I'm just not sure that it's as good as what it could be based on trialing and error. So if I continue to develop this car and continue to refine the steering more so, I believe I can get a better steering package than what Wisefab is. And this doesn't have roll center correction or anything like that, but this is a good example of how far you can take factory steering. Now we're still a long way from where we need to be, but we're still a long way from where we were 3 events ago. So a little bit more refinement with the steering will help a lot. This car is pretty much bang on everywhere else, to be honest, in terms of feel. It's just the steering needs more adjustment. Okay, so it's one day later. I just dropped the shocks down to Owen and the boys at CBD Panel and Paint, the guys that do all of my painting of my cars and painting the wheels, who have just die grinded this shock for me. So here's an example of, you can see I've just kind of ovaled, well, they've ovaled that a little bit, and you can see that how this is where I'm getting the adjustment. So factory is there, and I am moving it to there, somewhere about there. You can see how much camber that changes too. So at the same time in fact, let's just put a bolt in that. So that gives you the worst case. That's how it was before in terms of the KPI angle, and just by slotting that 4 mils, we've moved it in that far. You can see it's still got quite a bit of lean on it, to be honest. Interesting. But that is probably less than what it had before for that amount of steering lock. So if I just flatten it off a little bit, let's have a look at that, which is that's pretty flat, a little bit of lean, relative angle. Just going to do a quick little test as well. I'm just going to drive it forward and back on the spot just to see how it feels when I'm just in the garage actually, but I can kind of get a sort of a rough idea of how the car's going to feel on the track just by doing this in the garage. Let's just do this now. I'd say based on just that, the steering feels pretty good actually. I'm able to get the car, you know, like that quite easily, whereas before it would be really fighting itself. So that KPI adjustment's already noticeable just by driving around the garage. So I think on the track it's gonna, I think it's gonna really help, because that felt good. The question is, will this hold up? But I'll take a welder to the track, and worst case I'll weld that. I don't have enough time to do a proper job on it. I've tightened the shit out of these. These are like super tight, so if they do slip, it'll be, yeah, I mean, I'll have to do something about it, but hopefully they don't slip. If they do, yeah, then I'll just weld it up at the track just to keep us on the track, but then I have to think about something a bit more permanent.